The bell above the door chimed softly. The bakery was nearly silent. Behind the counter stood a woman, her shoulders slumped with a weariness that went far beyond a simple lack of sleep. As Mark and his son Leo gazed at the sparse selection of pastries, the telephone rang, its shrill cry tearing through the quiet. The woman, Sarah, answered, her voice a practiced, cheerful melody. "The rolling pin, how can I help you?" But the melody quickly faltered, collapsing into a single strained note. The color drained from her face, leaving a pale, taut mask. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the edge of the glass counter. Her body braced as if for a physical blow. Her voice dropped to a desperate, pleading whisper, one she clearly hoped her two customers couldn't hear. "I know. I understand the terms. I do. I just need a little more time. Please. It's been slow. I know. But it is going to pick up. I have some new ideas. I promise." There was a long, terrible pause, a silence filled with the crushing weight of a final verdict being delivered from miles away. Her posture sagged further. "I understand," she breathed out, the words barely audible. She hung up the phone with a slow, deliberate motion, keeping her back to the room. For a moment, she didn't move, a statue of defeat. She took a deep, shaky breath, her entire body shuddering with the effort to hold herself together. When she finally turned back around, a smile had been forced onto her face. It was a masterpiece of maternal armor, a shield forged in the fires of private struggle, designed to protect the world, and especially her child, from the terrifying truth. It was a smile Mark recognized instantly. He saw a version of it in his own mirror every morning. "So sorry about that," she said, her voice pitched a little too high, a little too bright. "Now, what can I get for you two handsome gentlemen today?" Leo, blessedly oblivious to the undercurrent of raw panic in the room, pointed a small finger at a lone cupcake with a swirl of chocolate frosting. For a fleeting second, as Sarah's gaze fell on the boy, her smile became genuine, a brief sunrise in a sky full of storm clouds. As Mark stepped forward to pay, the pieces of her life seemed to assemble themselves before his eyes. He saw the frantic juggling act, the suffocating financial terror, and the fierce, all-consuming love for a child that forces you to keep standing, keep smiling, keep fighting, long after you think you have nothing left. It was his own life, just written in a different font. And in that moment, he knew he couldn't just buy the cupcake and walk away. Who was this man? Mark, who saw a crisis and felt a kinship instead of pity. For 5 long years, since the day his world had fractured and rearranged itself, his universe had orbited a single, brilliant son, his son, Leo. Being a single dad was a title he wore with a profound sense of pride, but it was also a heavy cloak, lined with a weight that most people never saw. Their mornings were a chaotic symphony of mildly burnt toast, frantic searches for that one specific library book, and a relentless, heart-pounding race against the unforgiving clock. The world saw a competent, put-together father dropping off a happy, smiling kid at the school gates. But just beneath that placid surface, a quiet, high-frequency hum of anxiety was a constant companion. The immense pressure to be everything, the provider and the nurturer, the disciplinarian and the comforter, the rock and the safe harbor, was a crushing force. Society, with its well-meaning but often clumsy assumptions, had its own deeply ingrained ideas about single fathers. There was a persistent, unspoken stigma that they were somehow less capable, substitutes playing a role they weren't designed for. So he overcompensated with a fierce, quiet determination. He packed the perfect lunch, complete with a handwritten note. He never missed a single parent-teacher conference, sitting in a sea of mothers and trying to ignore the subtle shift in the room's dynamics. He worked until his eyes burned and his head throbbed, fueled by caffeine and fear, all to ensure the bills were paid on time and that Leo had everything he could possibly need and more. He was building a fortress of normalcy and security around his son, brick by painful brick. The quiet hours of the night were always the hardest. After Leo was asleep, his soft breathing filling the stillness. When the house was finally completely still, a specific and potent kind of isolation would creep in from the shadows. It was the bone-deep feeling of being on a tiny, remote island, solely responsible for a miraculous, tiny human, with absolutely no one to share the dizzying triumphs or the terrifying fears with. He would scroll endlessly through photos on his phone, watching his son grow up in a series of digital snapshots, a desperate attempt to freeze time. He double-checked the locks on the doors, then checked them again. He would lie awake and pray with a silent, desperate fervor that he was doing it right, that he was enough. He worried about money, about the precarious future, about whether he was teaching his son enough about kindness and resilience, and what it meant to be a good man. He was a man fighting a silent, lonely battle every single day. Her name was Sarah. He didn't know that at first. To him, she was just a woman inside the little bakery at the end of his street, a fleeting image in his peripheral vision on his daily commute. The sign above her door, the rolling pin, was hand-painted, the letters slightly faded and weathered, a testament to a dream that had seen better days. He'd glance in and see her, a whirlwind of flour and hurried motion, her face often etched with a look of strained determination, so familiar it felt like looking at a reflection. He didn't know then that her life was a near-perfect mirror of his own, reflecting the same struggles, the same fears, the same fierce love. Sarah was a single mother to a bright-eyed, endlessly curious little girl named Lily. That bakery wasn't just a business venture for her. It was her lifeline, her fortress, a desperate all-in attempt to build a stable, warm, and beautiful world for her daughter on her own terms. But the dream was crumbling, the foundations cracking under a relentless assault of financial pressure. The brutally long hours she poured into the shop, hours stolen from her daughter, were barely enough to keep the lights on. The financial strain was a constant, suffocating presence, a relentless churning anxiety about providing for every single need on a single, unpredictable income. It was a weight on her chest that made it hard to breathe. Her days were a frantic, exhausting ballet of kneading dough before sunrise, serving the handful of customers she had, and then rushing to pick up Lily from school. A bright, unwavering smile plastered on her face to hide the crushing failures of the day. She felt the profound, echoing isolation that so many single parents know intimately. The feeling of being solely and completely responsible for everything. There was no one to celebrate a small victory with, like a perfectly risen brioche. There was no one to lean on when a supplier demanded a payment she simply didn't have. She was a superhero in her daughter's eyes, a magical baker who could create anything, but her own world had become achingly small, confined to the four walls of her struggling shop and the immense crushing weight of her responsibilities. "I overheard," Mark said quietly, his voice gentle so as not to startle her. "The phone call. I'm sorry. I know how tough it can be." Sarah looked up at him, and for a moment, her carefully constructed mask slipped. A flicker of raw, unguarded vulnerability crossed her face, so intense it was almost painful to see. It's been a rough month," she admitted, her voice a fragile whisper that seemed to cost her an immense effort. "I'm Mark," he said, extending a hand across the counter. It felt like a monumental gesture. "And this is the birthday boy, Leo." "Sarah," she replied, managing a small, real smile as she shook his hand. Her hand was cool and dusted with a faint film of flour. "Happy almost birthday, Leo." She then turned, grabbed a small, beautifully decorated sugar cookie shaped like a star, and handed it directly to Leo. "On the house," she said with a soft wink. That was it. That was the moment that changed everything. Here was a woman standing on the very edge of a financial cliff, a woman who had just been pleading for her professional life, and her first unthinking instinct was an act of simple, unprompted kindness to a child. That small act of grace, offered in the face of her own immense hardship, was what moved him from a place of passive empathy to active resolve. This was no longer a business decision in the making. It was a gut reaction, an overwhelming wave of shared humanity that demanded action. "I want to help," Mark said, the words tumbling out before his rational, cautious mind could second-guess them. Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion, and her guard went back up instantly. "That's very kind of you, but I don't need any charity." Her pride was a shield, sharp and formidable. It was just like his. "It's not charity," he insisted, leaning forward slightly, his voice low and earnest. "It's an investment. Look, I'm not a rich man, Sarah, not by a long shot, but I'm a single dad. I know exactly what it's like to feel like you're treading water in the middle of the ocean with no land in sight. I know what it's like to lie awake at night, wondering how you're going to make it all work." He could feel Leo's small hand slip into his son looking up at him, listening to every word. "I look at this place, at you, and I don't see a failing business. I see your passion. I see the heart you pour into every single thing you bake. And I believe in you. I believe in people who fight this hard for their kids." Tears, hot and immediate, welled in her eyes. She fought them, blinking furiously, but they spilled over anyway, tracing clean paths through the flour on her cheeks. For a single parent, the act of being truly seen, of having someone acknowledge the depth of your invisible struggle, can be more powerful and more restorative than any financial bailout. "I have some savings," he continued, speaking quickly before the moment could pass. "It's not a fortune. It's my what if the car breaks down fund, but maybe it's enough for a new coat of paint, some professional signs, some new equipment, enough to give you some breathing room, to let you breathe again. Think of me as a silent partner, a very, very silent partner who just wants to see you win." She stared at him, speechless, her mouth slightly agape. The silence in the small bakery was no longer heavy with despair, but thick with unspoken understanding, a bond forged in a single, breathtaking moment of shared humanity. It was one single parent looking at another across a vast chasm of loneliness and saying, "I see you. I've been there. You are not alone." In that instant, Mark knew this decision was about more than just her business, more than just a smart investment. It was about healing something broken and isolated in himself, too. It was about building a bridge off his own island. The investment wasn't just a check deposited into a bank account. It was a spark thrown into dry kindling. It was tangible permission for Sarah to dare to hope again, a luxury she hadn't been able to afford for a very long time. That evening, long after the last of the unsold pastries had been packed away, they sat at one of her small, wobbly tables. Their kids, Leo and Lily, sat on the floor nearby, a shared pack of crayons and a stack of napkins serving as their canvas, instantly comfortable in each other's quiet company. With a cup of lukewarm coffee for him and tea for her, they mapped out a blueprint for a comeback, their hushed, excited voices filling the space that had for so long been home, only to worry. The first change was visible, a bold declaration to the street that something new was happening. They spent an entire weekend painting. Mark brought Leo, Sarah brought Lily, and together, the four of them transformed the tired, worn-out space. The peeling, dreary gray walls were covered in a warm, buttery yellow that seemed to radiate its own light. Mark, surprisingly handy, replaced the single flickering fluorescent tube with a series of inviting low-hanging pendant lamps that cast a soft, golden glow. It was hard, messy work, but it was filled with an easy, bubbling laughter that the bakery hadn't heard in years. Lily and Leo, covered in paint and giggling, were tasked with painting a small, low section of the wall, their own mural of happy, colorful chaos. Next, a new, professionally printed sign was installed, replacing the faded, hand-painted one. It read, "The rolling pin, baked with love." The simple tagline, Mark's idea. He drew on his dormant marketing background from a past life and set up a clean, bright social media page. He spent an afternoon taking mouth-watering photos, not just of the cakes and breads, but of Sarah's flour-dusted hands, of her focused expression as she decorated a cake, telling the story of a single mom pouring her entire heart and soul into her craft. The posts weren't just about selling pastries. They were about selling her story, her passion. Slowly at first, and then seemingly all at once, things began to fundamentally change. People who used to walk by without a second glance now stopped, their curiosity piqued by the fresh paint and the inviting atmosphere. The little bell above the door began to chime more and more frequently. Sarah, who had been on the verge of giving up just weeks before, was a whirlwind of renewed, boundless energy. The deep-set weariness in her eyes was replaced by a bright, unmissable spark of pride and accomplishment. Her creativity, finally unleashed from the suffocating prison of financial fear, blossomed spectacularly. She started experimenting with new recipes, introducing things like lavender honey scones and cardamom-spiced morning buns. The real profound change, however, was personal. The simple relief from the constant grinding financial stress was life-altering for Sarah. It was as if a crushing physical weight had been lifted from her shoulders, and she could finally stand up straight, both literally and metaphorically. That profound relief bloomed into a quiet, steady confidence. She was no longer just surviving day to day. She was building, creating, and thriving. For Mark, the change was just as deep and just as transformative. Helping Sarah gave him a renewed sense of purpose that his 9-to-5 job could never provide. The act of giving, of investing in someone else's dream, was a powerful antidote to his own loneliness. It built that bridge he had envisioned, leading him off his isolated island of single fatherhood. They were no longer two separate, struggling single-parent households. They were a team. Their families began to intertwine seamlessly, beautifully. They would take the kids to the park together on Sunday afternoons. Lily and Leo became the best and dearest of friends, finding in each other an unspoken understanding of their unique family structures. They saw their parents supporting one another, demonstrating kindness, collaboration, and resilience on a daily basis. They were learning, through observation, that family isn't just about blood or last names. It's about the people who show up for you, who believe in you when you stop believing in yourself, and who help you paint your world a brighter, more beautiful color. Conclusion: today, you simply can't miss the rolling pin. It's the brightest, most vibrant spot on the block, a place buzzing with the warm, cheerful energy of a community that has found its heart. Sarah now hosts kids' baking classes on the weekends, and her face, once etched with worry, is now perpetually beaming with a radiant, infectious joy. The tables are always full, not just with customers, but with friends and neighbors who treat the bakery like a second home. The heavy shadow of desperation is completely gone, replaced by the warm, welcoming glow of hard-won success and true belonging. Mark is there often, not as an investor checking on his portfolio, but as a friend, grabbing coffee before work or helping pack up boxes at the end of a busy Saturday. His initial financial investment was paid back with quiet gratitude long ago, but that was never the point, and they both knew it. The real return on his investment is something that could never be quantified on a balance sheet. It's in Sarah's confident, easy smile, in the secure and loving home she's built for Lily, and in the easy, unbreakable friendship their two families have forged, a support system that has shattered the chains of isolation for all of them. This journey taught them both something profound, a truth that resonates far beyond the walls of a small bakery. Our greatest, most enduring strength as human beings lies not in our independence, but in our ability to connect, to see our own hidden struggles and secret hopes reflected in the eyes of others. Empathy is the most powerful and valuable currency we possess. Sometimes, the greatest and most rewarding investment we can ever make isn't in stocks or in property, but in each other. It's a leap of faith, a courageous belief that a single, simple act of kindness can create a powerful ripple effect of hope that changes not just one life, but many. Thank you for watching. If this story moved you, please like and share this video. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories that remind us of the incredible good that exists in the world.